Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. I've received a few emails recently that all sounded surprisingly similar. Different men, different marriages, but the same theme. I'm doing what she asked. I'm listening more. I'm texting her during the day. I'm trying to show up differently. And then the confusion. She still says it's not enough. If you're a successful man, that is maddening. You're not someone who ignores feedback. You don't avoid responsibility. When there's a problem, you adjust. Tell me the expectation, tell me the metric, tell me where I'm missing it, and then you handle it. That mindset has served you elsewhere very well in your life. It's how you've built your career. It's how you solve problems. It's how you lead. So when your wife says something like, "I need more from you," your brain goes straight to execution mode. What does more mean? More texts? More date nights? More helping around the house? More listening? And you start treating the situation like something to manage, a variable to adjust, a system to optimize. And here's what's hard to hear. That exact strength, that project manager mindset, is often the thing keeping you stuck at home. Not because you're unwilling, not because you don't care, but because marriage is not a performance problem. And when you approach it like one, she can feel it. Today, I want to break down why doing more in your marriage still isn't creating the closeness that you so want, and what she may be actually reacting to, and what most successful men completely miss when they try to fix this. Welcome to episode 44. You're doing what she asked, so why does she still feel distant? Let's slow this down a little bit and look at what's actually happening. A man hears something like, "You're not doing enough," or "I don't feel connected," or "You're not showing up for me," and immediately his brain goes into interpretation mode. What does that mean? What specifically am I not doing? What would count as enough? So he asks, "What do you want me to do differently? How can I fix this? Give me an example. Give me a list." And sometimes she says something that makes it worse. "You should just know." That sentence drives men crazy because from his perspective, it's not fair. If I don't know what the target is, how could I possibly hit it? If you won't tell me what you want, how can you expect me to deliver it? And here's what most men assume in that moment, that she's being vague, that she's avoiding responsibility, that she doesn't know what she wants. Sometimes she genuinely doesn't have clean language for it. She just knows how it feels to be with you lately. She knows she feels alone in the room, or unseen, or like she has to work too hard to access you emotionally. But she cannot convert that feeling into a checklist. When you keep pressing for specifics, it reinforces the very thing she's reacting to. Because now the dynamic feels transactional. Tell me the requirement, I'll meet the requirement, then we're good. But connection doesn't work like that. When you treat her words as instructions instead of clues about her emotional experience, you move into management mode. You start solving tasks. She's reacting to tone, energy, availability, the feeling of being prioritized, and those are much harder to quantify. So yes, it absolutely is frustrating. You are asking for clarity. She is asking for something she feels but cannot reduce to bullet points. And if you don't understand that difference, you will keep increasing effort while missing the meaning altogether. Here's another layer that most men don't fully see. By the time a woman says, "You should just know," she has often tried the checklist approach. She has explained herself. She has spelled it out for the umpteenth time. She has created the bullets you keep asking for. She has said, "I need you to fill in the blank. I need you to do more. I need you to put your phone down at night." Or, "I need you to plan something once in a while." She has said, "I need you to talk with me without dragging every conversation out of you." And very often, she has also said, "I need to be able to bring up hard things without it turning into an argument or you shutting down." That last one changes everything. Because when she cannot bring up something difficult without the conversation escalating, becoming defensive, or turning into a logic debate, the entire emotional context shifts. Instead of addressing the issue itself, she finds herself managing your reaction. Instead of feeling heard, she feels like she has to tread lightly. Instead of solving something together, she begins calculating whether it's even worth bringing something up. And over time, that calculation becomes exhausting. Now, let's look at what usually happens next. You respond, you adjust, and for a period of time, you genuinely try. You listen longer. You plan something thoughtful. You make visible efforts. You help her at home. And in your mind, you are doing exactly what she asked of you. The problem is not that you do nothing. The problem is that the change often feels temporary. I don't believe that you are doing it to be manipulative. I don't believe it is because you secretly don't care. I do believe it's because your effort is driven by tension, and it's driven by the desire to reduce conflict or resolve her dissatisfaction. And once the temperature lowers, well, your nervous system kind of relaxes, and then the urgency fades, and your brain assumes that the issue has been handled. From her perspective, something very different is happening. She is not evaluating whether you completed the task. She is evaluating whether something fundamentally has shifted in who you are becoming. When the effort fades back towards baseline, she doesn't just feel disappointed. She begins forming a conclusion. If I have to keep escalating this, if I have to keep reminding him, if I have to keep teaching him how to engage emotionally, then I am carrying the relational weight alone. That is when "you should just know" emerges. Not as a demand for mind reading, but as fatigue. It is the voice of someone who no longer wants to manage the emotional side of the relationship by herself. Now, I want to make a comparison that most successful men understand immediately. In your line of work, in your career, when you receive feedback in a review, you understand something immediately, instinctively maybe. You know that that feedback is not a short-term assignment. It represents a shift in expectations. If your boss tells you that you need to lead your team differently, communicate more clearly, or develop a new competency, you do not interpret that as a 3-week experiment. You recognize it as growth that needs to stick. And if you are in a leadership role yourself, you know you would not tolerate temporary compliance from your staff. If someone improves only while they feel watched and then slides back to old patterns, you would call that out so fast? You expect maturity to be sustained. You expect development to become integrated. Yet, in marriage, many capable, high performing men treat relational feedback like a project sprint. Like there's intense effort for a window of time followed by this gradual drift downward back to baseline once the pressure decreases. When that cycle repeats, it communicates something unintended. It tells her that closeness only happens when she pushes for it. It tells her that growth only activates under threat. It tells her that without tension, you revert back to what feels most comfortable. And when difficult conversations consistently derail into defensiveness, argument, or shutdown, an additional layer gets added. It begins to look as though protecting your current version of yourself matters more than evolving into a stronger, more connected partner. Most men do not consciously think, oh yeah, I refuse to change. What they are often protecting is their sense of competence. They do not want to feel inadequate. They do not want to feel like they're failing at something that should just come naturally. So they defend, they rationalize, or they redirect. But self-protection in those moments has a relational cost. If the only time sustained change occurs is when she threatens to leave or threatens something, that reveals something sobering. It shows that you are capable of regulating yourself. It shows that you can make lasting adjustments. It shows that you can prioritize growth when the stakes are undeniable. It also shows that urgency, not commitment to maturity, is driving that transformation. Emotionally mature relationships are not built on a crisis response. They are built on steady, voluntary evolution that does not require escalation to activate. Now, we need to address the deeper misunderstanding that sits underneath all of this. When she says, I don't feel connected, or you're not really in it with me here, or I need more from you, your instinct is to translate that into missing behavior. You assume there must be an action that, if just performed consistently enough, will resolve this tension. More communication, or more date nights, or more helping around the house, or more engagement. That translation makes sense if you're in a performance framework. In systems, when output is low, you adjust your input. When engagement drops, you increase activity. When feedback points to a gap, you close the gap. When feedback points to a gap, you close the gap. But most of the time, she is not describing a missing behavior. She is describing a lived experience of being in a relationship with you. That distinction matters. A behavior is observable and measurable. An experience is cumulative and relational. It is shaped by tone, responsiveness, emotional steadiness, curiosity, and whether she feels prioritized without having to compete for your attention. When you reduce her experience to a task list, you may increase effort while leaving the emotional atmosphere unchanged. You might initiate more conversations, but still remain guarded. You might plan thoughtful outings while carrying subtle irritation that you had to be prompted. You might listen longer, but still internally be building your counter-argument. From the outside, the behavior does improve. From the inside, the experience may feel largely the same. This is where another layer quietly enters the dynamic: transactional expectation. When effort is driven by compliance, it often carries an unspoken equation. I am doing what you asked. You should now respond differently. You should now feel satisfied. You should now soften. That expectation is rarely stated out loud, but it's often present. And when her emotional response does not immediately change, well, frustration builds. You begin to feel as though your effort goes unrecognized. She begins to feel as though your effort was conditional. Now, the relationship subtly shifts from connection to negotiation. Instead of cultivating closeness, you both begin evaluating the return on investment. She evaluates whether your change is durable. You evaluate whether your compliance produces appreciation. And that is not a partnership. That is performance tied to a payoff. The deeper issue is not that you are unwilling. It is that you have been trained to associate effort with outcome in almost every other place of your life. Work harder and get results. Improve strategy, increase profit. Execute well, earn recognition or a bonus. Marriage does not follow that formula cleanly. Closeness is not a reward dispensed after sufficient compliance. It is the byproduct of consistent emotional presence that does not require negotiation to sustain it. When she says she doesn't feel connected, she is not asking for a temporary increase in activity. She is responding to the overall relational climate. And climate is shaped by who you are being over time, not how intensely you perform in response to her dissatisfaction. If you have ever been trained to evaluate yourself at that level, you will continue to search for the missing behavior while overlooking the missing atmosphere. That is not a character flaw. It's a training gap. Many successful men have been highly trained in execution, performance, leadership, and measurable growth. Very few have been intentionally trained in cultivating emotional safety, relational steadiness, and voluntary vulnerability as enduring traits. A more mature question is not, what action am I missing? It's, what is it like to be married to me right now? And would I want to live in that atmosphere? That question cannot be solved quickly. It requires self-observation, emotional regulation, and a willingness to evaluate yourself beyond output. But it's also the level where real transformation begins. Most successful men understand responsibility. They understand providing and protecting and leading and executing. They know how to be dependable. They know how to carry weight. They know how to fulfill a role. What many men were never explicitly taught is how to cultivate friendship inside their marriage. And I don't mean being playful or casual. I mean that relational presence. A friend is emotionally steady. A friend pays attention without being prompted. A friend notices shift in tone and mood and responds with curiosity rather than irritation. A friend can sit in discomfort without trying to shut it down or win their position. That isn't being soft, it's maturity. Many men approach marriage as a role to perform well under pressure. Husband, provider, problem solver. But friendship is not something that you activate when tension rises. It's posture that you carry consistently, even when nothing dramatic is happening. When your wife brings something hard to you, she is not simply evaluating whether you can execute tasks. She is evaluating whether you are emotionally safe to build a life with. Can you hear feedback without collapsing into shame? Can you stay engaged without escalating into an argument? Can you remain curious about her experience without turning it into a negotiation? Those are friendship skills. If you only engage deeply when she threatens to leave, you're not cultivating a friendship, you're managing risk. If you only increase emotional availability when her dissatisfaction peaks, you are not leading relationally. You're responding to a crisis. Friendship means you're invested in her experience of you, even when there's no immediate consequence for ignoring it. It means you care about the atmosphere, not just the conflict. It means you do not require escalation to mature. And this is where the training gap becomes very clear. Most men were rewarded growing up for output, competence, achievement, and control. Very few were modeled what it looks like to stay emotionally present during uncomfortable conversations without defending themselves. Very few were taught how to absorb hard truths without making the feedback about their ego. Very few were encouraged to evaluate themselves based on relational climate rather than performance metrics. So when she says, "You should just know," she may not be asking you to read her mind. She may be longing for a partner who's paying attention without being prompted. Someone who notices patterns. Someone who adjusts voluntarily. Someone who does not need repeated reminders to care. Here's a really uncomfortable part. Wives are not the default teachers for this. It is not their job to keep educating you about emotional maturity. It is not her responsibility to manage your reactions so that you can grow comfortably. It is not her burden to repeatedly convert her experience into bullet points, so all you have to do is respond. If you want a different relational climate, you have to choose growth without coercion. That is leadership. You know this. You know this from what you do in your career. It's strength, and it's also what friendship looks like. If you are listening to this and feeling a bit exposed, that's not a bad sign. It means that you care. The men who tune this out don't feel discomfort. They feel justified in who they are. But you are still here, and that matters. The issue has never been whether it's possible for you to change. You can. You've adapted before. You've grown before. You've taken feedback and elevated your standards in other areas of your life. The real question is different. Are you willing to mature in your relationship with that same level of seriousness? There's a difference between asking, "What do I need to do so she stops being upset?" and asking, "Who do I need to become so that closeness feels natural?" One reduces tension. The other one builds strength and emotional connection. Marriage doesn't need more bursts of effort. It needs steadiness. Can you stay regulated when a conversation gets uncomfortable? Can you remain curious instead of defensive? Can you care about the atmosphere you create, not just whether the conflict dies down? Well, that is maturity. Not intensity, not compliance, not crisis response. If you only grow when the stakes feel high, that isn't leadership. That is pressure management, crisis aversion. If you invest in growth before things escalate, well, that is ownership. And ownership changes everything. You don't need to overhaul your personality. You don't need to become someone else. You do need to refine how you show up. What's required here is less performance and more presence, less negotiation and more consistency that lasts beyond 3 or 4 weeks. If you recognize the cycle that I've just laid out today, the answer is not to try harder for a few weeks. It's to decide today, right now, that this part of your life deserves deliberate development. And if you want help doing that work in a way that is direct and structured and it actually changes the climate in your marriage, that is exactly what I help men do every single week. You are capable of more than just compliance. Take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.